Every story begins with a spark, a single page, a single voice, a single chapter. Welcome to Chapter 1, where our authors take you on the journey in their own words. Settle in, listen closely. This is where the adventure begins.
The Kink Brothers by Lynn Chantale, Chapter 1. Waves of heat rose from the red brick street. Israel Asgood winced as he touched the too-hot door handle on the driver's side of a sporty BMW. The vehicle, like its occupant, demanded a second and third admiring glance. His car, a newer dark blue sedan, was parked in front of hers. He scanned the sparse sidewalk and car-lined street for any potential hazards before opening the door. Sweat already rolled down his back and settled in the waistband of his white shorts. He grabbed the bandana from his back pocket, mopped his brow, and returned it to his pocket as he continued to scan the street. He offered his hand in a smirk to the pretty woman inside. When she smiled back and placed her hand in his heart squeezed. He caught sight of his reflection in her sunglasses. His own sunglasses did little to hide the thin pink line bisecting his right cheek. A long-ago scar from his adventurous youth involving inline skates, a ramp, and a fence he hadn't wanted to meet. For the umpteenth time, he wondered what she saw in him. She, Cailyn Finch, accountant extraordinaire, intelligent, witty, and beautiful, was the woman he was so in love with. He knew there was no one else for him. And still, he couldn't figure out what she saw in him. "You're frowning." Her husky voice poured over him like cool water. "Am I?" Israel said. "I can't imagine why, when I have the most beautiful woman at my side." And she was beautiful. Flawless mocha skin, dark brown eyes, and full, kissable lips. Even though the day was hot, she looked cool and comfortable. She smiled, smoothing a hand down the simple floral A-line skirt. The short-sleeved bolero-type jacket emphasized her small bust line, and he sighed in appreciation. "You are such a flatterer." She tossed her long curly hair from her face. Even as he placed a hand at the small of her back, he moved so his body was between hers and any potential danger. He pressed the clicker and his car alarm chirped. Again, he glanced up and down the sidewalk. He looked down to find her grinning at him. "What?" "You have this way of making me feel protected without being overbearing," she answered. A flush heated his cheeks. "You mean a lot to me," he admitted. And she did. She would be the one woman he would pledge his life to and for. She wasn't just beautiful to the eyes, but to his heart as well. He tucked a flyaway curl behind her ear, then caressed her cheek with the back of his knuckles. "I don't want to see anything happen to you." She held his hand to her face. "I trust you to keep me safe." She raised on tiptoe and brushed her lips to his. "As of now, no one knows what I'm doing." He pressed a kiss to the back of her hand. "Are you sure?" "Auditing another accountant's work while they're absent is standard procedure. There's just something off about these accounts." "If they're as bad as you say they are, TJ can help." Cailyn adjusted the bag at her shoulder. "Do you really think so?" He nodded, opening the heavy glass door. Cool air enveloped them as they traversed the narrow foyer. Thin brass mailboxes lined one wall, while a dismal reception desk occupied the other. A hint of lemons, mildew, and overheated electronics swirled in the air. Israel wrinkled his nose, avoiding the sneeze. Every time he entered the building, his allergies went haywire. TJ needed to tear the whole building down and start from scratch. Another sneeze tickled his nose, and this time a loud "Achoo!" blasted the air. "Bless you," Cailyn said. Nodding, Israel continued forward. The entryway opened into a well-worn linoleum space. A door for the stairs was to the right, and an old-fashioned elevator was before them. "What a quaint elevator," Cailyn mused. Israel barely stifled a shudder at the even narrower elevator. The doors were more of a gate and were closed by hand, while the car itself stuttered its way to each floor. He'd gotten trapped in the thing a few years ago and was not willing to take the chance. It's one flight up, and they have the entire floor to themselves. "Afraid of tight spaces?" she teased. I've got nothing against Otis, he said, referring to the inventor. Let's just say I'm not fond of this particular elevator. He steered her toward the stairs, and they managed a short flight. Israel pushed his sunglasses to the top of his head as the light changed. They exited onto a landing. Israel grasped the knob. Nothing happened. With a sigh, he pushed the small black button beside the door. At the buzz, he turned the knob and unsheared Cailyn inside. Now they were in a long corridor. Industrial beige carpeting muffled their footsteps and gave way to cream-colored walls. He stopped before a double door painted with red and gold lettering, heralding red investigations. He tried the knob. The door swung open on silent hinges. He crossed what could laughably be a waiting room, although the only thing waiting was a plastic ficus tree in much need of dusting. Cailyn shifted beside him. Are you sure we're in the right place? She wrinkled her nose and sneezed. Bless me. She dug in her bag for her tissue. Bless you indeed, he chuckled. We're in the right place. Neither TJ nor Red are big on welcoming visitors. Then how do they stay in business? They paused outside a white door with no windows. He chose his words carefully. Word of mouth. A faint voice reached them through the closed door, and he raised his fist to knock. The next word stalled his fist. He getting his dick sucked! The disembodied voice enunciated each word. Israel stared at the white wooden door, then swiped a hand down his face. The woman at his side stifled a giggle. He resisted looking at her, but a blush heated his cheeks at his friend's candor. He's rather frank, isn't he? She said with a grin. Look, motherfucker, I done told you he getting his dick sucked. I ain't walking in interrupting my man's actions just so you can cuss him out. So I had to leave a message with me or call back later. Israel didn't want to hear more. He raised his fist and rapped on the door. Well, call back later. I got company. Enter at your own risk. Swallowing hard, Israel pushed open the door and prepared for the worst. Papers were stacked haphazardly on what he presumed was a desk. The other indication of the folder's true purpose was the computer monitor shrouded by more papers and folders. Shaking his head, Israel focused on the man seated behind the mess, skinny and black as charcoal. His cinnamon and butter-colored dreads were held back by the headset on his head. The mouthpiece was pushed to one side. He grinned, revealing two capped gold teeth. Real, what brings you slumming? He came from behind the desk and grabbed Israel in a hug. And this bit of caramel delight. Baby girl, you're the finest thing I've seen on his arm in a long while. TJ, this is Cailyn. She needs a little of your expertise on a very sensitive matter, Israel began. How sensitive? Boyfriend may come out and kick my ass sensitive? Or I need to hire a lawyer to keep from being ass rape sensitive? TJ asked. TJ, Israel admonished. What? The other man's eyebrows climbed his forehead in an attempt at innocence. It's a legitimate question. Israel shook his head. He should have known better than to bring Cailyn here. But TJ was the only person he trusted to help in this matter. And if Israel had to endure the colorful speech, then so be it. Hopefully neither. I'd researched these companies myself, but every keystroke is monitored at work, and I don't want to do this from home. Cailyn dug in her pocket and extracted a folded page. I've worked for this company for a very long time, and I've never heard of any of the companies listed on that paper. She handed it to TJ. Anything you can find on them would be helpful. TJ grinned. Anything for a beautiful lady. He plucked the paper from her fingers and unfolded it. So what are you doing with a guy like Israel? I know you can do better than a lowly pie. Israel held his breath a moment. He and Cailyn had been dating several months, and he'd asked that very question on a near daily basis. He wasn't ugly by anyone's standard, but he wasn't that drop-dead hero gorgeous that women went gaga over either. While he was fit, he relied more on his brains than his brawn. Cailyn chuckled and glanced at Israel. He has a certain charm that appeals to me. He breathed an inward sigh, enjoying the smoldering look in Cailyn's eyes. It spoke to him, and an answering spurt of lust rushed through him. Yeah, this woman meant a lot to him, and that single glance made up for the momentary doubt of not being attractive enough. He's always had something going for him. TJ looked at the page. Where did you say you worked? I didn't, Cailyn answered. TJ looked up with a toothy smile. Can't blame me for trying. I recognize one of these names, and I can tell you the company ain't legit. It's a front for something else. He set the paper on the keyboard and went thumbing through the stacks of files on the desk. Several threatened to fall, but TJ seemed oblivious to the hazard and kept searching. How do you know? Israel wondered. Red came across this company in one of his exploits, but since it wasn't relevant to his case at the time, he had me file it away. You should really invest in a filing cabinet, Israel suggested. Then where would I keep my snacks and weed? He waved to the bank of cabinets obscured by yet more paper. Cailyn laughed. At the glare Israel shot her away, she covered it with a cough. Really, TJ? Man, you need to grow up. Just keeping it 100, my friend. He pulled a green folder free from a stack above the computer monitor. Here we go. He thumbed through the file. Just preliminary stuff. I didn't trace back who the company belongs to, but it's a front for Lasco Entertainment, which is also bogus. He placed the file on the keyboard as well. Give me a few days to look into this and the companies you asked about, Cailyn, and I'll get back to you. She nodded. Sure. Thank you so much. Any friends of Rails is a friend of mine. Israel snaked an arm around Cailyn's waist and tugged her close. Don't get any ideas. He laughed. Of course not. I knew she was spoken for when y'all walked in. A woman this fine doesn't stick around just because you're charming, real. There's real feelings involved, am I right? Heat crept up his neck. His friend was just too damn perceptive. Keep your deducing to the case and not my personal life. TJ laughed. Why? When you both feel the same way. Israel propelled Cailyn forward. Bye, TJ. Tell Red I'll see him next time, when he's not busy. The man ain't been in the office since we shacked up with Gloria. Can barely pry him loose to even do work. Who do you think's been running this place? What? Dude's so wide open, he acts like it's the first time he'd never got pussy or head. Just shameful. TJ shook his head, a mournful expression on his face. And because you brought this pretty lady for my viewing pleasure, a 10% discount from my usual fee. Thanks. I'll see you in a few days. Israel unshared Cailyn from the office before the man could say anything else. How long have you two been friends? Cailyn asked as soon as they were out of the office. Childhood. I like him. Israel swung around, trapping her between his body and the cinder block wall. A flare of desire ignited in her irises as he pressed closer. You do? She skimmed her hands up his torso, then locked her fingers behind his head. What's not to like about him? He's funny, a tad unorthodox in his business, but he seems to know his stuff. You got all that from those few minutes. She nodded. He has a system for filing, even though it doesn't make sense to you and me. And he reads people. Very well. So he was right that you have deep feelings for me? Me having feelings for you is irrelevant. You have someone else in your life. I never kept that from you, Israel. I've always been honest about the other people I date. Please don't belittle my feelings for you just because I date other people. What I feel for you is real, and I've fallen in love with you. Her admission squeezed his heart. Here was the one woman he believed he could spend the rest of his life with, but she would never be truly his. So how could he admit how much he loved her and needed her in his life if she couldn't be wholly his? And don't belittle your feelings either. She cradled his cheek. We have more than just amazing chemistry between us, Israel. He didn't want to admit that she was right, but what else was he supposed to do? You turn me into knots, woman. She smiled. Likewise. Whatever I can do to make loving me easier, I'll do, even if it means leaving, but I will not stop being who I am. And that was another dilemma. He could no more ask her to stop being who she was than he could stop being an investigator. He loved her conviction and confidence. If he asked her to stop being who she was, neither of them would be happy. You are an extraordinary woman. She smiled. I've been through this a time or two, Israel, and as much as it would pain me to let you go, I would do it to make you happy. He lowered his head until his mouth was a mere breath from her lips. You are just as amazing. And when you say things like that, I just want to fuck you senseless. She closed the distance between them and fused her mouth to his. For a moment, he was caught off guard, but his body responded to the softness of her lips. The gentle caress of her fingers at the nape of his neck, igniting passion as only she could. He pushed her against the wall, taking over the kiss, devouring her mouth as he thrust his tongue inside. She twined her leg with his. He hiked it higher until his erection fit nearly in the opening he created. Her heat tantalized him, and he cursed the fact that they were in a public place. There was always tonight. Let's meet for drinks tonight, he murmured against her lips. I'd like that, she said. Slowly, he released her. Good. Then maybe a little something else? I'm looking forward to it. She glanced at her watch. I've got to get back to work. He threaded his fingers through her silky black hair. Tonight, he would show her everything she needed to know. We'll talk more tonight. She nodded and slipped beneath his arms. He followed at a slower pace, watching to make sure she made it safely to her vehicle. Not that he expected any trouble, but ever since Cailyn told him about her discoveries at work, he'd been a little on edge. She didn't see the danger in it, but in his line of work, people had been murdered for far less, which was one reason why he'd brought her to TJ and no one else. TJ could find the information she needed, and no one would be wiser. And if by some chance TJ slipped up and let it be known he was looking, the man could take care of himself. At the short toot of a horn, Israel lifted a hand and waved. Maybe he would do some investigating of his own. He had his own copy of Cailyn's list. Anything to put her mind at ease. Cailyn Finch ducked her head and hurried back to her office. Low murmurs drifted over the tops of the cubicles. She wasn't late, but she'd been gone longer than she intended, and she didn't want to do anything that would draw attention to her. Can I, Miss Finch? A male voice called. She slowed her steps and glanced over her shoulder. One of the interns, shoot, she couldn't remember his name, was hurrying toward her with an open folder and an ink pen. As with times before, he seemed familiar, but she couldn't place why he seemed familiar. Yes? I need your signature on these forms. Mrs. Lucas said she couldn't process them without your signature. Cailyn paused long enough to examine the documents he proffered. They were the standard travel vouchers for the upcoming conference. She looked them over and scrawled her signature on the dotted line. There was one more step she needed to take. She walked to the copy machine, laid the documents face down on the glass, and pressed start. Wordlessly, she handed the intern the originals, then kept the copies for herself. Most of her contemporaries skipped a step, or waited for the person who was handing the documents to make the copies for themselves. But with some of the discrepancies she'd found, she wasn't leaving nothing to chance. Miss Finch? Yes. She studied him a moment, and for the first time noticed he was fidgeting with his tie, as well as the imprint of his fingers on the folder. Something about the way he moved. Where had she seen that before? His gaze darted around before he finally focused on her face. Is it possible I could talk to you later? He stepped closer. I've noticed some things, and well, you're about the only decent supervisor who follows the rules. She schooled her features in what she hoped was a neutral mask. Sure. Drop those vouchers off and stop by my office. He nodded, turned on his heel, and hurried down the corridor. Cailyn continued to her office. Had he discovered some of the same discrepancies she had? Or was there something else he found? Maybe there was something in the vouchers that caught his attention? She mused as she unlocked her office and stood just on the threshold. Stale white walls gave way to industrial beige carpeting. The one good thing she could say about her office was the wall of windows. At least she had sunlight to welcome her and keep the room from being too drab. She didn't adorn her walls or desk with family photos or pictures of vacations, nor did she have her diplomas on display. She tried very hard to not keep anything personal about her office. Well, her one concession were the potted plants in front of the windows. 2 ferns she'd named Flopsy and Mopsy. Both stood sentry and route iron stands like bookends. She crossed to one and removed a yellowed leaf. Carefully she surveyed her space, Nothing in the office spoke of who and what she was, preferring the anonymity, and now it seemed to work in her favor. Every day she came in and did her job. Cailyn loved being an accountant. She relished the complexity of balance sheets, projecting a return on investment, or even advising a client on the best way to maximize their bottom line. What she truly enjoyed was finding lost money. That was her specialty. Forensics accounting. Anytime a company needed a special audit, they called her, and she worked very hard to maintain her integrity and ethical standards. Those two things were drilled into her by not just her instructors, but her family as well. If people couldn't trust you with their money, then you couldn't be trusted at all. So she took all the advice and training and made sure she could be trusted. The only time she'd ever broken the rules were earlier today when she gave TJ the names of the companies she couldn't find. She crossed the floor, stepped behind the desk, and stopped. Very few items were on her desk. But what was there? The ink blotter, mouse pad, and pencil holder had been moved. Not a lot. Just enough for her to notice that the blotter no longer aligned with the edge of the desk, and the ink pen she'd laid across the keyboard before she left was now on the desk next to the keyboard. A chill walked down her spine. Her office was locked, as were her desk and computer. Had someone accessed any information or found something? She inspected her desk drawers for any signs of tampering. Finding none, she moved on to the computer. The CPU was farther out than she remembered. She lowered to her knees and examined the back of the unit. Something similar to a thumb drive was sticking out. For a moment, she debated on calling someone from IT to come look at it, but maybe this was exactly what she needed. Standing again, she studied her plants. Now she noticed a bit of dirt underneath one planter. That hadn't been there before she left for lunch. She crossed to the plant. Some of the soil had been churned. She smoothed it back into place. Did someone think she was hiding something in Mopsy? It's okay, she cooed. She checked Flopsy's dirt. It had sustained the same treatment. What were they looking for? A knock sounded on the door, and she turned. The intern, his name still escaped her, stood on the threshold, sneaking glances over his shoulder. Come in. She brushed a few grains of dirt from her hands. He quickly crossed the room, pulling a sheaf of papers from beneath his shirt as he approached. I know enough to know these accounts aren't supposed to be like this. He pressed the pages into her hand. I was going to bring this to my immediate supervisor, but I overheard him talking to someone on the phone about transferring money into these accounts. He searched her face. Please, is there something you can do? Cailyn swallowed. I will give this information to a third party because I don't think my boss would be of any help. She stuffed the pages in her purse. I'm sorry, I can't remember your name. He grinned. It's okay, I'm Paul, and you're the first person to admit you couldn't remember. I promise I won't forget this time, she said. Thank you. He turned to leave. Will you let me know if I was right or if I've done something really wrong? Sure thing. Between you and me, I think your instincts are right on. He nodded and left the office. Cailyn dropped into her chair and blew out a breath. She needed to call Rome, the other man she was dating, and if he could meet her in the office, he would be able to tell her what she was looking at on her computer.
The first chapter has been read, but the story has only just begun. Join us again for more voices, more worlds, more Chapter 1.